What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com. Here are my DFS picks for NBA Sunday, March 28th. These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button and hit that bell icon so you don't miss our new videos. In this video, I'm going to go over my top picks for today's NBA slate. And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made. Okay guys, we have a 3-game slate tonight, so let's take a look at the point guard position. I like Kyle Lowry from the Toronto Raptors playing the Portland Trailblazers, who have the 7th worst defense overall, and they give up the 2nd most fantasy points to opposing point guards. Kyle Lowry has averaged 36 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 35 minutes per game with a 22% usage rate. He scored 24, 28, and 39 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 34, 33, and 36 minutes. He's projected at 36.6 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5.5 times value. He's 6,600 FanDuel salary and 900 more on DraftKings. Vegas thinks there's going to be 228.5 points scored in this game, and he scored 28, 45, and 48 fantasy points in his last 3 games versus the Trailblazers. It's a great matchup, a fast-paced game. He's coming off of a bad game. He's got good player versus team history, and his FanDuel price is super low. So I love that FanDuel price. So I like Kyle Lowry here versus the Portland Trailblazers. Okay, I'm going to give you a value play here. High risk, high reward play. I like RJ Hampton from the Orlando Magic playing the LA Lakers, who have a good defense overall, and they give up the 11th most fantasy points to opposing point guards. Now, RJ Hampton was just acquired from the Denver Nuggets, and he's going to see his first action with the Orlando Magic tonight. He should make his debut. So he's projected at 17 fantasy points here tonight. That's 4.9 times value. He's 3,500 FanDuel salary and the same price on DraftKings. So it's hard to know how he's going to perform in his first night with the Orlando Magic, but he's minimum salary, so he's worth a risk. So I like RJ Hampton as a tournament play here versus the LA Lakers. Okay, let's take a look at the shooting guard position. I like CJ McCollum from the Portland Trailblazers playing the Toronto Raptors, who have the 9th worst defense overall, and they're middle of the pack defending opposing shooting guards. CJ McCollum has averaged 38.3 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 33 minutes per game with a 30% usage rate. He scored 39, 47, and 25 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 36, 37, and 38 minutes. He's projected at 38.5 fantasy points here tonight. That's 4.9 times value. He's 7,900 FanDuel salary and 100 more on DraftKings. So he scored 48, 28, 37, 47, and 29 fantasy points in his last 5 games versus the Raptors. So he would have got you 5 times value or more, 3 out of those 5 games. And Vegas thinks this is going to be a high-scoring game, 228.5 points scored in this game. So I like CJ McCollum here versus the Toronto Raptors. Before I continue with the picks, I'm excited today because we added a new contest for everyone watching.
If you want to enter the drawing for $100 PayPal, all you need to do is like this video, hit that subscribe button, and make a quick comment below to be entered into the drawing. We'll reply to a random comment and let you know that you won, and then we'll send you $100 PayPal. So it's that easy, and we pick a new winner every Saturday and announce them in our video. So get your comment in now so I can add another entry for you.
Another shooting guard that I like is Fred VanVleet from the Toronto Raptors playing the Portland Trailblazers, who have the seventh worst defense overall, and they give up the second most fantasy points to opposing shooting guards. Fred VanVleet has averaged 40.1 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 37 minutes per game with a 24% usage rate. He scored 31, 22, and 49 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 39, 30, and 40 minutes. He's projected at 40.9 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5.5 times value. He's $7,400 FanDuel salary and $400 more on DraftKings. He scored 19, 52, and 34 fantasy points in his last 3 games versus the Trailblazers. This is a great matchup, a fast-paced game, and we know Vegas thinks this is going to be a high-scoring game, so I like Fred VanVleet here versus the Portland Trailblazers. Okay, let's take a look at the small forward position. I like Michael Porter Jr. from the Denver Nuggets playing the Atlanta Hawks, who have the middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and although they've been pretty good versus opposing small forwards, Michael Porter Jr. has averaged 30.2 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 30 minutes per game with a 20% usage rate. He scored 35, 28, and 30 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 39, 28, and 32 minutes. He's projected at 33.3 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5.1 times value. He's $6,500 FanDuel salary and $300 more on DraftKings. Vegas thinks there's going to be 227 points scored in this game, so I like Michael Porter Jr. here versus the Atlanta Hawks. Okay, another small forward that I like is Carmelo Anthony from the Portland Trailblazers playing the Toronto Raptors, who have the 9th worst defense overall, and they give up the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing small forwards. Carmelo Anthony has averaged 24.1 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 26 minutes per game with a 24% usage rate. He scored 13, 32, and 22 fantasy points in his last 3 games, and he played 27, 32, and 23 minutes. He's projected at 24.4 fantasy points here tonight. Now, that's only 4.5 times value. He's $5,400 FanDuel salary and $100 less on DraftKings. But he scored 42, 43, 26, and 32 fantasy points in his last 4 games versus the Raptors. So that's excellent player versus team history. Now, he's only scored over 30 fantasy points once in his last 5 games, so he's definitely on a cold streak, but I think he can bust out of that cold streak here tonight versus the Toronto Raptors. This is a high-risk, high-reward play, but if he gets you over 30 fantasy points, he'll get you 5 times value or more. So I like Carmelo Anthony here versus the Toronto Raptors. Okay, let's take a look at the power forward position. I like Pascal Siakam from the Toronto Raptors playing the Portland Trailblazers, who have the 7th worst defense overall, and they give up the 7th most fantasy points to opposing power forwards. Pascal Siakam has averaged 39.6 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 35 minutes per game with a 25% usage rate. He scored 52, 51, and 42 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 37, 34, and 35 minutes. He's projected at 38.4 fantasy points here tonight. Now on FanDuel, that's only 4.5 times value because he's 8,500 FanDuel salary, but he's 900 less on DraftKings. So I love that DraftKings price. And he scored 53 and 50 fantasy points in his last 2 games versus the Trailblazers. So I like Pascal Siakam, especially on DraftKings here versus the Portland Trailblazers.
Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all of our DFS tools for all sports. You can try the Position Optimizer, where you can see the top players ranked for each position. And we added a new Player Trends tool, where you can see the top salary differences between FanDuel and DraftKings. It's a really good tool to help you pick out value for the site that you're playing on. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups.
Okay, another power forward that I like is John Collins from the Atlanta Hawks playing the Denver Nuggets, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they're middle-of-the-pack defending opposing power forwards. John Collins has averaged 33.7 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 31 minutes per game with a 23% usage rate. He scored 58, 23, and 35 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 34, 32, and 28 minutes. He's projected at 34 fantasy points here tonight. Now again, on FanDuel, that's only 4.2 times value because he's 8,200 FanDuel salary, but he's 900 less on DraftKings. So I love that DraftKings price. And he scored 36, 34, and 54 fantasy points in his last 3 games versus the Nuggets. So I like John Collins here versus the Denver Nuggets. So I gave you 2 players who look underpriced on DraftKings, but if you're looking for a FanDuel play that might be a little underpriced, take a look at Aaron Gordon from the Denver Nuggets playing the Atlanta Hawks, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and although they've been pretty good versus opposing power forwards, Aaron Gordon has averaged 30.5 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 29 minutes per game with a 24% usage rate. He scored 30 and 29 fantasy points in the last 2 games, playing 33 and 35 minutes. He's projected at 33.1 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5.3 times value. He's 6,300 FanDuel salary, but he's 700 more on DraftKings. So I love that FanDuel price. And he scored 29, 25, 57, and 44 fantasy points in his last 4 games versus the Hawks. So I like Aaron Gordon, especially on FanDuel, here versus the Atlanta Hawks. Okay, moving on to the center position. I like Clint Capella from the Atlanta Hawks playing the Denver Nuggets, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and although they've been pretty good versus opposing centers, Clint Capella has averaged 40.7 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 29 minutes per game with a 20% usage rate. He scored 50, 52, and 32 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 29, 30, and 29 minutes. He's projected at 39.5 fantasy points here tonight. Now on FanDuel, that's only 4.6 times value because he's 8,500 FanDuel salary, but he's 1,000 less on DraftKings. So I love that DraftKings price. He scored 37, 27, 44, 37, and 36 fantasy points in his last 5 games versus the Nuggets. So he's probably a DraftKings play for me only. So I like Clint Capella on DraftKings here versus the Denver Nuggets. Now another center that I like is a guy who just came back last game, had a pretty good game in limited minutes. I'm expecting his minutes to continue to go up each game he plays. So I like Jusuf Nurkic from the Portland Trailblazers playing the Toronto Raptors, who have the 9th worst defense overall, and they're middle of the pack defending opposing centers. Jusuf Nurkic has averaged 26.4 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 23 minutes per game with a 22% usage rate. He scored 23 fantasy points in his return last game, played 18 minutes with a 28% usage rate. Now he's projected at 23.8 fantasy points here tonight, but I'm expecting him to get some extra minutes here, so I think he can get you close to 30 fantasy points or more and get you 5 times value or more. He's $5,200 FanDuel salary and $300 more on DraftKings. So I like Jusuf Nurkic before his price continues to climb here versus the Toronto Raptors.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smiggity smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NBA slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again, and good luck.